Coffee catastrophe. Sarah clutched the ceramic mug, its warmth doing little to soothe her jittery nerves. The aroma of hazelnut coffee filled her nostrils, a bittersweet perfume of impending doom. It was only Friday, but this first week as an intern felt like a year. Navigating the sleek, modern office was a minefield of potential social faux pas. Now, delivering Vivian Evans coffee, black, no sugar, this felt like defusing a bomb. She tiptoed past cubicles, the click of her heels echoing unnervingly in the otherwise silent space. Each step was a conscious effort to maintain balance, a silent prayer against catastrophe. Then, it happened. A junior developer, seemingly materializing from thin air, rounded the corner, eyes glued to his phone. The collision was gentle, almost balletic, yet the consequences were devastating. Coffee sloshed, a brown tsunami erupting from the mug and arcing through the air. Sarah watched, mortified, as it cascaded down the front of Vivian Evans' crisp, white dress. Time seemed to stop. The developer mumbled an apology and scurried away. Sarah stood frozen, the empty mug dangling from her trembling hand. The rich scent of hazelnut now mingled with the metallic tang of fear. Vivian Evans stared down at the spreading stain, her expression unreadable. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Sarah's mind raced, searching for the right words, the magical incantation that could rewind time. "Ms. Evans, I am so sorry." The words tumbled out in a rush, a desperate plea for forgiveness. "It was an accident. I didn't see him." Vivian finally looked up, her eyes meeting Sarah's. They were a startling shade of blue, sharp and assessing. For a moment, Sarah thought she saw a flicker of something, amusement. Before it vanished, replaced by a stoic calm. "Accidents happen, Ms. Chen," Vivian said, her voice surprisingly even. She reached for a tissue from her desk, dabbing at the stain. "Though I confess, this was a rather thorough application." Sarah cringed. "I can get it cleaned. I'll pay for the dry cleaning, of course. Or I can run out and buy you a new dress, whatever you need." Vivian sighed, a sound that held more weariness than anger. "That won't be necessary. It's just a dress. Although," she paused, a glint in her eye, "perhaps you could ensure my next coffee delivery is less eventful." Sarah nodded eagerly, relief flooding through her. "Yes, of course. Absolutely. I'll be extra careful. I promise." Vivian turned back to her computer, dismissing Sarah with a curt nod. "See to it." Sarah backed away slowly, feeling the weight of the averted disaster. She glanced back at Vivian, who was now deeply engrossed in her work, seemingly unfazed by the coffee catastrophe. Sarah couldn't help but wonder if there was more to Vivian Evans than the icy exterior she projected. And she wondered if she'd just made a friend, or an enemy. The unexpected reprieve. Sarah spent the morning navigating the office like a fugitive, her eyes darting to avoid any chance encounter with Vivian. Each ding of the elevator sent a fresh jolt of anxiety through her system. She stuck to the stairwell, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she climbed the 15 flights. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted from the break room, a cruel reminder of her disastrous performance yesterday. During lunch, she found David perched on the edge of his desk, meticulously cleaning his keyboard. "Hey, Sarah. You look like you've seen a ghost. Everything okay?" "It's Vivian," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I haven't seen her since, you know." David chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "The coffee incident?" "Relax, Sarah. Vivian's not as scary as she seems. She values results, sure, but she's also seen it all. A little spilled coffee isn't going to make or break you." "But she looked so disappointed," Sarah mumbled, picturing Vivian's impassive face as the dark liquid spread across her pristine white blouse. "Vivian always looks impassive," David countered, leaning closer. "It's her default setting. Trust me, she's probably forgotten all about it. Just do your best work, and you'll be fine. The afternoon crawled by. Sarah buried herself in spreadsheets, determined to prove her worth. As 5 o'clock approached, her heart hammered against her ribs. She gathered her things, steeling herself for the inevitable confrontation. She rounded the corner near Vivian's office when she saw her, standing by the window, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. Sarah froze, ready to turn and flee, but Vivian had already spotted her. Vivian turned, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Sarah, before you leave, about yesterday." Sarah braced herself, her palms sweating. "Don't worry about it," Vivian said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "Accidents happen. Just try to be a bit more careful in the future." She paused, her eyes twinkling. "And maybe stick to tea." She gave Sarah a small, almost imperceptible nod and turned back to the window. Sarah stood there, dumbfounded. The reprimand she'd anticipated had been replaced by forgiveness. Kindness, even. The knot of anxiety in her stomach slowly began to unravel, replaced by a strange mix of relief and bewilderment. What did this mean? Was she in the clear? Or was this just a temporary reprieve before the axe fell? Top floor delivery. "Sarah, could you take these to Vivian on the top floor?" Mark's voice cut through the low hum of the office. He held out a slim file, its manila surface looking deceptively harmless. Sarah's stomach dropped. Vivian's office. The scene of the great coffee catastrophe. Of course, she managed, her voice a little too high-pitched. She reached for the file, her fingers brushing against Mark's, and quickly retreated. Back at her desk, the file felt heavier than it looked. She smoothed down the non-existent wrinkles on her skirt, took a deep breath, and opened the file. Tax projections. Just tax projections. Still, her hands trembled slightly as she scanned the pages, double-checking that everything was in order, that no rogue paperclips lurked within to sabotage her. She imagined Vivian sitting behind her massive desk, the city sprawling behind her like a glittering map of success. Would she even acknowledge Sarah, or would she simply accept the file with a curt nod, forever branding her as the coffee girl? The thought made her cringe. She took another deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked to the elevator. The brushed steel doors reflected her nervous expression back at her. She pressed the button for the top floor, the anticipation coiling tight in her chest. The elevator doors slid open with a soft whoosh. Empty. Good. She stepped inside, the scent of polished wood and faint citrus filling her nostrils. As the doors closed, she practiced what she would say, "Good morning, Ms. Evans. Mark asked me to deliver these tax projections." Simple, professional. The elevator hummed to life, ascending smoothly. Each floor number that lit up felt like a step closer to the gallows. She ran through the apology she'd rehearsed 100 times. It felt inadequate. Floor 28. 29. The air seemed to thicken. She checked her reflection in the polished steel again. Less nervous, more determined. Whatever happened, she wouldn't let this define her. The elevator slowed, the final chime echoing in the small space. The doors slid open, revealing the plush, hushed reception area of the top floor. Sarah stepped out, clutching the file, ready to face whatever awaited her. Trapped. The elevator lurched, a stomach-dropping sensation that sent Sarah's hand flying to the cold steel of the handrail. The lights flickered once, twice, then died, plunging them into near darkness. An emergency bulb sputtered to life, casting a sickly yellow glow. The music cut out mid-note, leaving a ringing silence. What was that? Sarah squeaked, her voice barely audible. Vivian, standing rigidly beside her, pressed the button for their floor, the 27th, then for the lobby. Nothing. Malfunction, I presume. Her voice was calm, almost detached, but Sarah could see the tightening of her jaw. "Oh my God," Sarah blurted, her cheeks burning. I am so sorry, Ms. Evans. This is all my fault. If I hadn't spilled that coffee. Vivian raised a hand, cutting her off. The coffee was an accident, Ms. Chen. And I doubt it has anything to do with the elevator's sudden indisposition. She reached into her purse, pulling out her phone. No signal. She sighed, a wisp of air in the confined space. Sarah felt a fresh wave of panic rising. Claustrophobia had always been a simmering fear, and this was a nightmare unfolding. We're trapped. The words were a whisper. Temporarily inconvenienced, Vivian corrected, though Sarah could hear a thread of forced optimism in her tone. She pressed the emergency call button. A staticky silence was her only reward. Great. Vivian drummed her fingers on the metal wall, an almost imperceptible rhythm. Sarah leaned against the opposite wall, trying to control her breathing. The air felt thick, heavy. She watched Vivian, trying to read her expression in the dim light. Was she angry? Annoyed? Or simply, resigned? Is there anything I can do? Sarah asked, desperate to be useful, to atone for her earlier clumsiness. Vivian looked at her, a flicker of something unreadable in her green eyes. Just, try to relax, Ms. Chen. Help should be here soon. But Sarah could see the doubt clouding her features. The elevator remained stubbornly still, a metal box suspended between floors, holding them captive. Breaking the ice. The elevator lurched back into motion, the sudden upward climb a palpable shift from the preceding stillness. Sarah focused on the numbers lighting up above the door, each one a marker of progress, a step away from the claustrophobic box. Well, Vivian said, her voice echoing slightly in the small space. That was unfortunate. Sarah winced. I am so sorry, Ms. Evans. About the coffee, about everything. I'll pay for the cleaning, of course. Vivian waved a hand dismissively, a glint of amusement in her emerald eyes. Don't worry about it, Sarah. It happens. Besides, it could have been worse. Imagine if it had been scalding hot. A weak smile flickered across Sarah's face. Right. Silence descended again, thick and uncomfortable. Sarah glanced at Vivian, noticing the faint coffee stain still clinging to the lapel of her impeccably tailored blazer. She desperately searched for something, anything, to say. Lovely weather we're having, isn't it? She blurted out, instantly regretting the cliché. Vivian raised an eyebrow. If you consider torrential downpours lovely, then yes, quite lovely. Sarah's cheeks flushed. Right. Well, at least it's good for the plants. Assuming they don't drown, Vivian countered drily, but the corners of her mouth twitched slightly. So, Sarah, how are you finding the internship so far? It's great. Really challenging, but I'm learning a lot. Sarah's voice gained a bit more confidence. Everyone's been really helpful. Good. I expect you to be a quick study. We're a demanding firm. Vivian paused. Have you had a chance to look at the Henderson account files yet? Sarah nodded enthusiastically. Yes. I was actually reading through them before the coffee incident. And I noticed the parallels to the Sunset Boulevard case. The way the media manipulated the narrative, the public's perception, it's all very similar. Sarah surprised herself with her own analysis. Vivian's eyes widened slightly. Sunset Boulevard? You've seen that? Oh, absolutely. It's one of my favorites. Gloria Swanson is just phenomenal. A genuine smile finally broke through Vivian's stoic facade. Mine too. That final scene, with the camera closing in, pure cinematic genius. Completely agree. And the dialogue? I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille, iconic. Sarah felt a surge of relief wash over her. They were connecting. Have you seen Casablanca? Vivian asked, her voice lighter now, the earlier tension melting away. Of course. And, the Maltese Falcon, Citizen Kane. Sarah rattled off a string of classic films, each title met with an enthusiastic nod from Vivian. The elevator doors slid open on the executive floor, but neither of them moved. The conversation flowed freely, a shared passion bridging the gap between intern and boss, clumsy blunder and unforgiving reputation. The air in the elevator, once thick with awkward vulnerabilities revealed. The silence in the elevator stretched, thick and uncomfortable despite Vivian's earlier reassurance. Sarah fiddled with the strap of her bag, acutely aware of the lingering coffee stain blooming on her blouse. She risked a glance at Vivian, who was staring straight ahead, her expression unreadable. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on her face, highlighting the sharp angles of her jaw. I'm really sorry about the coffee, Sarah blurted out, the words tumbling out in a rush. I know it was clumsy and unprofessional. Vivian finally turned, her green eyes softening slightly. It's fine, Sarah. Really. Everyone makes mistakes. Especially when they're starting out. The elevator lurched again, accompanied by a mechanical groan. Sarah's stomach flipped. Vivian sighed, a puff of air that ruffled a stray strand of red hair. You know, she said, her voice surprisingly low, this whole situation reminds me of my early days. Trying to navigate this industry as a woman, it felt like being trapped in a malfunctioning elevator, too. Sarah frowned, confused. What do you mean? It's a boys' club, Sarah. Always has been. You have to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously. Every mistake is amplified, every success downplayed. There were times I wanted to give up, to just walk away. Sarah listened, mesmerized. This wasn't the cold, calculating Vivian Evans she knew from the office. This was vulnerable. But you didn't, Sarah said softly. Vivian shook her head, a faint smile playing on her lips. No. I didn't. Because I have this crazy dream. I want to build something of my own. A company that values innovation and integrity, not just profit margins. A place where women don't have to fight tooth and nail to be heard. She looked away, a flicker of something akin to embarrassment in her eyes. Sounds ridiculously idealistic, I know. No, Sarah said, shaking her head. It sounds amazing. She meant it. Suddenly, the coffee incident seemed insignificant. She was seeing Vivian in a completely new light, a woman driven by passion and a desire to change the status quo. The elevator shuddered, then with a final, decisive lurch, began to move again. The doors slid open on the lobby, revealing the familiar bustle of the office. Vivian stepped out, turning back to Sarah. Don't let one spilled coffee define you, Sarah Chen. You have potential. Now, let's get back to work. Shared anxieties. The scent of burnt coffee still hung faintly in the air, a ghostly reminder of Sarah's earlier clumsiness. I'm so sorry about the coffee, Ms. Evans, she mumbled, tracing the rim of her now empty mug. Vivian waved a hand dismissively, the crimson of her lipstick a stark contrast to the pale porcelain of her skin. Water under the bridge, Chen. Besides, a ghost of a smile touched her lips, it woke me up more than the actual coffee ever could. Sarah managed a weak smile in return. The elevator incident, the spilled coffee, it felt like she tripped over every hurdle imaginable in her first few weeks. It's just. I feel like I'm constantly messing up. Everyone here is so polished. And I'm just not. She wrapped her hands around the mug, seeking warmth. I'm terrified of failing. The words rushed out, a dam finally breaking. Vivian leaned back in her chair, her gaze softening. This is a competitive environment, Sarah. But everyone makes mistakes. It's how you learn from them that matters. Sarah's gaze dropped to her lap. It's more than just the work. I miss my family. I miss home. The skyscrapers outside the window seemed to mock her with their cold, impersonal grandeur. Back home, the sky was wide, the air thick with the smell of pine, not exhaust fumes. Everything here feels so temporary. Vivian steepled her fingers, a thoughtful expression on her face. Belonging is something you create, Sarah, not something you find. Build connections. Find your tribe. It takes time. She paused, her voice dropping slightly. And don't be afraid to ask for help. Even the most polished exteriors often hide a few cracks. Sarah looked up, surprised by the vulnerability she glimpsed in Vivian's eyes. It was a fleeting moment, gone as quickly as it appeared, but it was enough. "Thank you, Ms. Evans," she said, the words genuine this time. That actually helps." "Vivian," she corrected, the corner of her mouth tilting upwards. "After the coffee incident, I think we've earned a first-name basis." "And Sarah," Vivian added, her voice regaining its usual steel, "don't let me catch you spilling anything else on my desk." A glimmer of hope. The red numbers above the door blinked 13, 13, 13, mocking their predicament. Sarah jabbed the call button again, the silence echoing her growing dread. It's dead," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Vivian's jaw tightened, the only outward sign of her inner turmoil. "Of course it is." She ran a hand through her meticulously styled hair, dislodging not a single strand. "All right, panicking won't help. Let's see what we can do." Sarah watched, mesmerized, as Vivian surveyed their metal cage. Her gaze landed on the small gap between the doors. "The emergency brake is probably engaged, but there's always a margin." She kicked off her expensive heels and retrieved the fire extinguisher from its alcove. "Hold this." She shoved the heavy cylinder into Sarah's arms, then wedged the pointed end of one heel into the narrow space between the doors. Sarah, juggling the extinguisher, felt a surge of adrenaline. Vivian, barefoot and determined, looked different. Vulnerable, maybe. With a grunt, Vivian leveraged her weight against the door, the metal groaning in protest. A little more, almost, the doors shuddered, then yielded with a loud clang, creating a gap just wide enough to peek through. "We're between floors," Sarah stated the obvious, peering into the shadowy abyss. Vivian wiped sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, leaving a smudge of makeup on her skin. "Brilliant deduction, Chen." But there was a flicker of something other than sarcasm in her eyes. "Well, I guess you could say I'm a professional door opener now." She grinned wryly, and Sarah felt a laugh bubble up inside her, escaping before she could stop it. "Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh. It's just, the shoes." Vivian's smile widened, revealing a glimpse of perfect teeth. A dimple appeared in her cheek, momentarily transforming her usually severe face. "They were Italian leather. A casualty of war, I suppose." The genuine amusement in her voice was a revelation. The sound was low and breathy, and Sarah suddenly understood why half the office was secretly in love with her boss. The moment hung suspended, charged with an unexpected intimacy. Then, Vivian straightened, the professional mask slipping back into place. "Right. Extinguisher. See if you can pry that door open a little more. Just be careful, we don't want to fall down the shaft." Lingering glances. The elevator lurched, a violent shudder that rattled Sarah's teeth. Vivian gripped the handrail, her knuckles white. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for another jolt, but instead, a smooth upward motion replaced the unsettling stillness. The lights remained on, a small mercy. "Well," Vivian said, her voice surprisingly even. "That was unpleasant." Sarah swallowed, her throat dry. Understatement of the year. She risked a glance at Vivian, who was now smoothing down her skirt, her expression unreadable. Had the coffee incident been forgotten? Or was this the calm before a professional storm? The doors slid open with a soft whoosh, revealing a throng of faces etched with concern. David Miller, his tie askew, pushed forward. Sarah. Vivian. Are you alright? We were about to call the fire department. A wave of heat flooded Sarah's face. She mumbled something about a power surge, trying to avoid eye contact with anyone. David, ever the perceptive one, clapped her on the shoulder. Don't worry about it. Happens sometimes. Just glad you're both okay. Vivian stepped out of the elevator, her demeanor cool and composed as always. Thank you, David. We appreciate your concern. She paused, her gaze briefly meeting Sarah's. A flicker of something Sarah couldn't decipher, amusement. Understanding. Passed between them before Vivian turned and walked towards her office. The next few days were a strange dance of avoidance and anticipation. Sarah found herself acutely aware of Vivian's presence, the soft click of her heels on the marble floor, the faint scent of her perfume. Their interactions were brief and strictly professional, yet Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. One afternoon, Sarah was at the coffee machine, refilling her mug, when Vivian walked in. The usual clatter of the office faded into background noise. Vivian poured herself a cup, her movements deliberate and graceful. Sarah braced herself for an awkward encounter, but instead, Vivian offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. Sarah, she said, her voice low, about the other day. Sarah's heart pounded. Here it comes, she thought, the reprimand. Thank you, Vivian continued, for keeping a level head. It wasn't exactly the best day for a wardrobe malfunction. Sarah blinked, surprised. You're not mad. Vivian chuckled, a low, throaty sound that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. Let's just say I've had worse things spilled on me. Besides, she added, her eyes twinkling, it was certainly memorable. She took a sip of her coffee, her gaze lingering on Sarah for a moment longer than necessary. A silent acknowledgement passed between them, a shared secret hanging in the air. Then, with a final, enigmatic smile, Vivian turned and left the break room, leaving Sarah to wonder what, exactly, that lingering glance meant.